Okay, I want to just move on to the next part of, obviously we've talked about leading up to the invasion, the different sides. Just how involved is the US, the UK, and NATO in Ukraine? Obviously, there's reports in the New York Times, the Washington Post that we're giving them intelligence. They have a training hub in Germany where they're almost
Yeah.
directing it, and they're coming in and out of Ukraine. Obviously, everyone knows about the huge amount of arms. America giving about 110 billion. I think Britain probably up to 4 billion. Everyone knows about this, but actually on the ground, and even see videos of what looks like English speaking, so American or wherever it is,
Right.
soldiers. Obviously, we don't really know if that's true, but just how involved are we and how much of a risk is that? And what do you think Russia's reaction to that has been so far?
I think it's a danger, like any kind of escalation, right? Escalation is a ladder. You can go up it or you can go down it. You can't go side to side, right? It doesn't work that way. And so when you just do things that might seem rather innocuous, of we're going to train. This was the news in the last day or two in the United States that they're going to send over a handful of Ukrainians to the U.S. to learn how to operate the Patriot missile batteries,
Yeah.
which is that's a whole other. I think that'd be a good case study in the fascination and the euphoria over the one Patriot missile battery that the U.S. is going to send. Again, it's have no impact on the war. And it is the focus of discussion in the U.S. about the war, right? But they're going to bring up. So even that type of escalation, though, because when you bring over 15, 20 Ukrainians to train on the system, that, of course, you've now passed the line you hadn't gone before, where you're bringing people over here. This is just one example of many you can give, right? But the other thing, too, is that when that doesn't work, when that doesn't help, well, what's the next step going to be? It's not going to be trained 15, it's going to be trained 30, or it's going to be
Mhm.
trained 60, right? Or it's going to be trained, bringing other people over to train in other different types of weapons, right? Or sending, so every time you escalate the war, two things happen. One, the enemy always counter escalates. They always do. They never not do that. I mean, when I was in the Iraq War and I was doing a lot of counter IED work, so going out looking for IEDs, roadside bombs, we bring in new technologies all the time to try and help us find these roadside bombs. And we estimated that within 30 to 45 days, whatever device we brought in, whatever tactic we had utilized to try and help us find and defeat these IEDs, the insurgents within 30 or 45 days would have developed a countermeasure to our countermeasure. I mean, it was that rapid. It was just the most insane form of competition, the most severe form of competition you could see. Let me give you an example. We had we brought into Afghanistan these they're called Huskies, and they had a big radar, ground penetrating radar on the front of them. Funny looking vehicles, right? And so they were out there for not more than a couple days. And within the week of those vehicles being there, they had found paint cans and dug into the road that the insurgents had buried to certain depths to see how far down the ground penetrating radar could find them. Right? I mean, this was within the week, within 3 or 4 days of those things showing up in Afghanistan, they are already being countered by the insurgency. I mean, so when this is what's up with escalation, where does it go? If that doesn't work, then what do you do next? And you're playing into the crowds that want the war. You're playing into the cliques that are cheering this on, that are demanding escalation. And when your escalation doesn't work, want more, you escalate further. You have to satisfy them again. You've already given in to them. So, I mean, this is the danger, and this escalation of what's happening in Ukraine really starts when Trump comes into office, because Obama, to his credit, does not send weapons to Ukraine. He sends other kinds of assistance, radios, and certainly we had forces over there training. We had military and CIA there training, just as a lot of other nations did. The Canadians were there, the Brits were there.
Yeah.
I mean, so you had that type of escalation. Where does it go? Where is it going to end up at? When again, it's a ladder. If you don't go down that ladder, you just keep going up. And certainly the U.S. role there right now, the overtraining that was occurring as soon as Russia invaded, the U.S. pulled those forces out. But at the same time, too, both JSOC, the American Special Operations, which also includes a lot of European Special Operations forces, because you have those relationships from working in Libya, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan together. So it really is a joint effort in the sense of a NATO effort on the Special Operations side. These guys all know each other. They're all friends now. They've killed and they've been killed with one another for years. So you have that Special Operations and CIA intelligence presence that's there. You also are going to, I believe, start seeing much more contractor support, because as the Americans push forward and the Brits and the Germans and the French push forward various pieces of equipment for the Ukrainians to use, you need people to maintain those pieces of equipment. And it can take anywhere from 3 months, 6 months, a year for someone to know how to operate a system, or even longer for someone to know how to maintain it and fix a system. So Germany sends over the Leopard tanks. Who's going to fix them? Who's going to work on them? Who's going to be doing that preventive maintenance that you need on vehicles like that continuously to make sure they run? So I think you're going to see a lot more contractors going over as well to support these weapon systems, but, and then certainly, of course, you have operations that have been conducted, whether it was the destruction of the Nord Stream 2 pipelines, the destruction of the Kerch Bridge. There's a journalist here in the U.S., a guy named Jack Murphy, who's got some pretty good credentials. I would trust what he says based on his background, who wrote a piece a month or so ago about how the CIA has been utilizing another European intelligence agency to conduct sabotage operations in Russia. So you have all those types of things, I think, like you would suspect you would have, but you've also had some pretty spectacular attacks that, again, the Kerch Bridge bombing, the Nord Stream pipeline bombings, which have, of course, led to a further escalation. So, in the U.S., when they talk about how the Russians have been striking at Ukrainian energy infrastructure, and it's cold and people are freezing in their homes and everything, and it's left out that they weren't doing that until the Kerch Bridge was destroyed, right? Or until the pipelines were hit.